If you've ever wondered how to make an NPC, then I've got some basic guidance today based off of the Dungeon Master's Guide of 2024. The Dungeon Master does a pretty good basic guidance on how to create an NPC and is a fantastic foundation for you to start on when thinking about NPCs. If we're continuing our series on creating a campaign and learning everything you need to know about being a Dungeon Master, this will be our next step today. We're going to create some NPCs. The DMG gives you 6 basic principles to create an NPC. A lot of them you can kind of already assume what they are anyway, but let's get into them. The first one is a name. Of course, if you're creating an NPC, you want a simple name that your players will remember. The DMG gives you 6 random tables, all of which are for names. There are 2 more random tables in this section, which we'll get to later. But if you're struggling to pick a name, you do actually have quite a few options to pick from here. For new DMs, I always recommend keeping your names simple so that your players will remember them a lot easier. If I were to grab a D12 or something, I've got them. I've got the D12. If I were to grab a D12 and have a look at the tables, I have a number 7. I'm going to stick with common names at the moment. So I'm going to take Cathra, which is in the common names table in the DMG. That's the first name. Let me get maybe something a bit, well, I'll go simple, I'll say. So from table number 4, there's monosyllabic names. Roll it again, and that is Holg. So I have Cathra Holg, for example. Very easy, very simple to remember. I don't think your players are going to have problems with that. The next piece of guidance is to have a stat block. Generally, the DMG, although there is some information about enemies and stat blocks, it says to look into the monster manual for this, which is unfortunate because if you wanted all of the NPC information, you'd hope it would be all in the same book, but that's not the case. And there's more of that later. Stat blocks, I don't think are the most important pieces to NPCs unless you're talking about a big villain, or if you're looking at a big kind of supporting member from a town nearby, then you might need a stat block. But generally, if you're not prepared with one, then you won't have any problem just kind of guessing one anyway once you get used to the damage your players put out and the health that your players have. So I don't think it is necessary entirely. You definitely do need them, but you don't need them for every NPC is the main problem. Next up, we have alignment. Choosing an alignment, they say, is to help understand the NPC's behavior. They don't actually tell you what the alignment is here. They say you should go look in the player's handbook for that. So again, another problem with the DMG. But generally, I don't think it's all that important anyway. You can guess an alignment, and it's because it's on a scale of good to evil and how honest they are in between the range of that. Generally, you know that a quest giver is mostly going to be honest and a villain is going to be an evil character. The third step kind of aligns with alignment, funnily enough, and it's their personality. When you have an NPC, you do want them to be distinguishable from other NPCs. A good example of that in personality is generally how they talk. Now, you don't have to be a voice actor as a dungeon master to impress your players. If you want to give a personality and help convey it with their personality, they could be quite frantic and they could be quite nervous when they talk and their personality seems a bit jittery and kind of scared. If you're talking to someone that's kind of royal in the world that you're building, then they might talk a bit regally and make sure that their pronunciation gets every T in every word, for example. They have a kind of higher and maybe a little bit of a slower speech. And I got another example. It's not my best, I'm not a voice actor, but I do Dungeon Master. But if you were talking to someone that took thoughtful pauses or prolonged pauses and they spoke in a slow, maybe perhaps methodical and really thought out way of talking, then they might be a bit of a suspicious character. Whether that's rightfully so or just to mess with your players is up to you. That is kind of the personality, and of course it suggests here that you should randomly determine one personality trait associated with the element of the NPC's alignment, which could be too thought out, I guess, and too restricting, because NPCs develop and a good dungeon master may either scrap their plans or kind of change what they had in plan for an NPC based on how favourable or unfavourable the players look at them. The next up, and again, this is something that I'm sure many of you are anxious about when creating an NPC, but it's actually their appearance. Now, appearances in D&D can be quite difficult, mainly because you might not be able to get things such as minis, or if you're playing online, you might not be able to get the tokens that you want. And for others, you may play in person and not have a battle map, and you do theatre of the mind all the time. Coming up with an appearance is quite challenging, especially when you want it to be distinctive. This is where you call on other pieces of media to think about people that weren't the main characters, yet you remember them. And on top of that, you don't even have to worry about that, to be honest, because my example that I like a lot is in Avatar: The Legend of Aang. Everyone is made up of certain nations, and at that point, they all dress culturally the same. However, your main characters are distinguished enough from their nations that you remember how they look. If I told you to picture Aang right now, you're gonna get generally people that look like the air nomads anyway. And this, they can get away with in Avatar because there are no other air nomads around. Aang is the only one that has the blue markings that he's got. However, he has the distinguishing trait that he is very young as an avatar, and at the same time is the only person that can have the white glowing eyes that he gets because he's the avatar. When it comes to people like Katara and Sokka, they look quite traditional in their water tribe sense. However, I always remember Katara's necklace that she's got that only she has. I always remember that detail for some reason. And on top of that, Sokka's quite easy because A, he can't bend an element of any kind, and B, he has his boomerang and the top knot that you don't really see with many other people, apart from Sokka, but he has the more traditional kind of samurai scenario going on. On top of that, you have other characters like Toph, who is blind, so she has the kind of translucent, clear green eye situation going on. Finally, we have Zuko, who has his burn mark on his face as well, and he develops a big change as well, which you remember as well. He always had that kind of hair up ponytail scenario, and he eventually cuts it off, and he has less hair and is a bit more relaxed with his, you know, scenario. So that's an example of just having small details that can give you an appearance that you can hang on to. Other ones, and of course I'm thinking of animation here, other ones I'm still thinking of animation, maybe not specifically American cartoons, but I'm thinking of course, Naruto, where Itachi really stands out to me because he often has his cloak over and his arm perched up on it because he's not well, of course. But I remember that, and if just a detail like that you can give, you don't even have to be talking about clothes at that point. You're talking about how he stands and how he appears. I guess, yeah, that works because this is the part about appearance. You just remember that. It's quite striking, it's unique. And of course they have the Akatsuki gown or whatever, and you can talk about details like that. So there are elements that should certainly go beyond clothing when you're talking about appearance so that your players will remember that. So I do focus on facial features, on body language and body features alike. For example, an enemy I've got, I was like, screw it, let's make this person really stand out. This big bad evil guy that they've finally been introduced to, and like, yeah, they've got 4 arms. And on top of that, they have a cloak that is made entirely, you know how feathers can be made into like clothing? They have a cloak made like that, but instead of feathers, it's daggers. And just that enough, I could leave it there, and of course I go into more detail, but just something different about how they look, even though they're humanoid. And that's what I think you need to make an NPC unique. If we're talking on a larger scale, factions, that's when you really start to talk about clothing a bit more. But yeah, I definitely think body features and how they hold themselves, and if they're injured all the time or so on, is a good way to talk about appearance here. So I think that's an okay recommendation, but naturally, this is finally where they're like, oh, we can do random tables, and they give you one. They don't tell you to go look in the player's handbook this time. So that's good of them. So let's roll a d12, and see what our character gets. They are exceptionally beautiful or ugly. I like to lean in the exceptionally beautiful kind of scenario, and so that's where I think I'll take this character, and we're going to build one really quickly after this, and we're going to use the NPC tracker that they give us to flesh it out. And then finally, the 6th one is that they have a secret that they are trying to either hide or protect, for example, and I'm pretty sure they have a table on that. Yes, they do. So again, there's a d10. Naturally, I only got a d12. They have an NPC or their family has been threatened with harm unless the NPC does something. So Cathrahulg has their own kind of quest to go on here, which they may not be able to. So this NPC is actually a tailor. So we're going to decide now, with that secret, we're going to build up this NPC. So if I stop closing this book for a second, and we talk about everything here, we have the NPC name, Cathrahulg. That's their name. And I'm going to say that they are how about we say today they are maybe a halfling, Yeah, we're just going to go with a halfling. Cathrahulg the halfling. Cathrahulg the halfling has a stat block of whatever. I don't think they're going to get in danger, but what I will say, I guess, they have a stat block of I don't really care, so I'll give them a generic kind of 8 HP scenario, and the damage they do is only ever 1d4. They are I would say, if we're talking about alignment, which we haven't really spoken about because it's in another book, and I am talking about the DM's guide here, so that is extremely frustrating. They have an alignment of lawful good, and so their personality is, they are very soft, and I'm going to say this is because they are a tailor. And not only are they a tailor for various lords around kind of their country, their state, their area. So they are a very, I wouldn't say renowned tailor, but they are certainly trusted with many lords of the area. So therefore, if they weren't, lawful good, they'd probably find themselves in a bit of a pickle if they were making enemies out there. So they are quite soft-spoken, they are very light on their feet, they move around quite purposefully because they are in tune with whatever they are perceiving when it comes to tailoring the clothes, looking at the people that they are making their clothes for. So they kind of dance around conversations very slowly, like a waltz. So that is kind of I'd say their personality. So on top of that, they aren't reserved. They have they aren't cocky or ego at the same time. They are very confident, less with themselves and more with their hands and what they can see. So they might be a little bit kind of judgmental of themselves, but they know their work is good. So they put their self-worth on that. Their appearance. So this halfling, I'd say, they are exceptionally beautiful, as we've rolled earlier. So with that, I would give them maybe a kind of situation where they're always in various beautiful clothes that you can describe on a whim, but they carry around a small walking cane that they've got. And I don't think that I want this NPC to be particularly important, but I think an object like a walking cane, like Sokka's boomerang, is enough to make you remember them as this halfling that is always in different clothes and is always walking around with that distinctive walking cane and that just dances around the floor. And then finally, they have a secret that I can't remember, that they've been threatened, or their family has been threatened with harm unless the NPC does something. So maybe someone out there doesn't like a lord that they work with. And this lord, beyond the realms of Tarbud, which is the village that you may meet them in, because that's where they're currently doing their work, there's a lord out there that they will occasionally visit, and some devious group want this lord to be taken out. Whether it's an opposing one there or not is for you to decide. And so with this, they want to line their next kind of piece of clothing that they're going to make for them with some kind of poison that will secrete into their body and off them. So this is the secret that they are dealing with. And with this, you may see their confidence disappears when that moment happens that they get threatened. So this personality has a shift that the players can notice if they interact with this person enough. And therefore, it may make them question this NPC. They may make them question Cathra and what's going on. And this is another adventure hook that your players can go on and solve or ignore if they want Cathra to either stop being lawfully good or secrete to the dark side and do it simply because their family may get harmed. I think that the guidance that the DMG has on building NPCs is good, actually. I think it's okay. It is upsetting that they require you to buy the other two books to fill in the parts that they talk about creating an NPC, where you can't fully create an NPC because not all the information's there. However, you can actually find that information on the free basic rules. There will be simple stat blocks and there is alignment there, so it's not terrible. It does have 8 random tables where 6 are names, whereas the old one had 11 and none of them were names. It's got its problem. I think you can create NPCs better than this with further guidance and more so further study. If you would like that video, let me know. Let this one be an addition to our creating a campaign series and teaching you how to DM. Of course, down below, there's actually going to be a PDF of simpler information from this video. I hope you like this and let me know what you want the next video to be. This has been High Initiative.